In this next example, we're going to eventually create a power regression. Our first step here is just to create a stat plot from some data. So we have data here about the body length of a golden African cat in centimeters and the mass in kilograms, and we're going to use that then to make a scatter plot. So we want to start by entering the data. So we go to Stat and Edit, and I've already entered my data here, so pause your video and enter the data. Once the data is entered, then we're going to quit and go to Stat again. And we want to, actually we don't want to go to Stat again, quit that, and we want to make sure that our stat plot is on. So if you go to the y equals, you can choose plot 1. Now remember that these plots sometimes mess up if you're trying to do a regular graph. So if you get a dimension error when you're trying to graph something else, it might be that one of these plots is turned on, and that can cause that to happen. So now that plot 1 is on, see it's highlighted there now, I can go to Zoom, and I want to do a zoom stat, which is number 9 here, so that it will give me an appropriate window for my stat plot. And there's the data. So now I have the stat plot for that, and we're ready to move on to the second part. In part B, we have the same data again. So we've already got that in our calculator, but now we want to determine a power function to model that. So down at the bottom here, you see the steps for that. We'll actually go through it on the calculator also. So on the calculator, to create the power regression, we want to go to Stat again. This time we want to choose Calculate, and then we're going to go down through the list and look for power regression. I see from the menu over on the left, that's going to be A. A is power regression, so choose that. Make sure at this point that your X list says L1, your Y list L2. Frequency list, we want blank, but we do want to store the regression equation, and we want to store that in Y1. Recall that to get to Y1, we go to alpha, then F4, or the Calculate Trace button there, and that will give us Y1, so we can choose that, and then down to Calculate. So there's the equation, but this is also pasted into the y equals. We can look at it there, but not very well. So you might want to write down some rounded off values. You really don't need all of that. So some huge decimal x to the 1.537 and so on and so on. Power there. And so we already have the proper window from doing the stat plot, so now we can just hit Graph, and we'll get that power regression along with the data. The final part of this example is we want to take that power regression we just created and use it to predict the mass of a cat with a length of 77 centimeters. So for that, bring our Wabbit back up here. And so from this same graph, we can go to Calculate, which is the second of trace. And we want to calculate a value when x is 77. We're going to put in 77 there and enter, and it gives us a y value of 14.07. So with a 77 centimeter length, we would expect one of these cats to have a mass of about 14 kilograms. At this time, turn to page 94 in your text and do problem number 30.